Hey there, everybody. Hope y'all doing good this evening. Just out here in the shop tinkering around a little bit. I had a viewer a week or so ago had a question about spinnerbaits, and I happen to own a company called Arkansas Custom Tackle that we build lots and lots of spinnerbaits, and I built spinnerbaits for myself actually before starting this small company, and so I know a little bit about them. Not everything, but a little bit. And I've learned so much over the years about a spinnerbait and what makes a spinnerbait work a little better. Now we're coming into the spring, early spring, mid, pre-spawn, and it is prime time to be throwing a spinnerbait. Sure enough, we can start getting a little bit of rain, muddy that water up a little bit. We're going to be in business. But I got an interesting story about it, and then we're going to go into some tips that I think will help you catch a lot more fish on spinnerbait. And the story goes back to years ago. I was fishing with my stepdad by the gentleman by the name of Jim Wolf, and he was a dentist, and we all called him Doc. So me and Doc were fishing. We fished tournaments some together, and we were fishing one day, and I was always I preferred to do two things years ago. I threw a square bill and I flipped a jig. That was, most people spinnerbait fish and flip, but I had just kind of got off into throwing a square bill. So instead of throwing spinnerbait, I threw square bills all the time. And that's what I caught most of my fish on. And so that's what I would do. Well, this one particular day, I was going along throwing a square bill along, and I picked up a spinnerbait and slung it around a little bit and didn't catch nothing on it. I threw the rod back down. It's like, I can't catch crap on spinnerbait. I don't even know why I ever throw a spinnerbait. Now, Doc, on the other hand, was a spinnerbait guru. That's what he loved to throw. He was left-handed in the first place, too. So making those little roll casts for him was just super easy, and he loved throwing spinnerbait. But he was in the back of the boat listening to me bellyache about it, and he said, Chris, you'd catch a lot more fish on that spinnerbait if you just throw it. And I'm like, and I didn't think too much of it that day. But later on, I got thinking about that, and I was like, I'll throw that square bill for 7 hours straight, not even get a bite on it. But I won't pick up spinnerbait and stay with it 10 casts. And what he was saying was, when it comes to throwing spinnerbaits, you got to throw a spinnerbait. You need to put the thing in your hand, and you need to keep throwing it. And you need to fish it till you figure out exactly what you need to do with it. And then you can have some stellar days once you figure out what the cast is, what the angle is, what the retrieve is. When you get that dialed in on spinnerbait, I promise you, you will be in business because it is ultra effective. So if you're struggling with a spinnerbait, probably not the spinnerbait's fault. It's probably the fact that you're not throwing it enough, giving it the right amount of effort like I was. And after all that, I began to throw one a lot more, and I began to catch a lot more fish on it. And now it's like my most favorite thing to throw of all things. I love throwing spinnerbait of all kinds. But over the years of building spinnerbaits, I've figured out a couple of things that are ultra important that most lure companies overlook or choose to not do to the spinnerbait, and it makes a huge difference. So, not running down any brands or anything like that, but the first thing I'm going to show you is that's ultra important with spinnerbait is I have just a standard war eagle here, and that's what I threw for years and years. And don't get me wrong, these war eagles are great baits. They are. I've caught it. There's no earthly telling how many bass I've caught on a war eagle spinnerbait. But I want you to pay attention to the length of this wire right here. This, what I call the arm. This is what I call a leg. This is what I call an arm. The length of the arm from here to here makes a huge difference. There's a freaking fly. That thing got to get out of here. Sorry about that. On how this bait works. And I want you to look at that when I'm, see how I'm touching my finger on there and how much that wire's moving? Can you see that? Now, this is one I build myself, and if you have someone that builds your baits, start having people make you some like this. But I want you to look at the difference in the length. Can you see that? This bait that I built for myself is about 1/4 inch longer on this arm. You can already tell the difference. What's this bait? What's this? Look at that. You can tell. See how much more that arm wiggles? These are both 35 gauge wire. How much more? That's how much more vibration you're going to get. The further longer this arm is, the further that blade is out on there, the more that bait is going to vibrate and catch more fish. Another thing that I noticed over the years, the war eagles are really bad about breaking, but they're all coated, and I love the coating. I do. I wish I could do this to my baits, but I don't want to compromise the wire, because when you coat that wire, what once was a 35, now you coated it, it's probably more like a 36, maybe even a 37 gauge. It's stiffer because it's got that coating on it. The other thing is it's been heated, which will cause this to become brittle. It makes a difference. The coating's nice, but I don't ever fish one with a coating on it anymore. I want standard old wire. Makes a difference as far as the longevity of the bait and the vibration in the wire. The shorter this arm is, the less this is going to vibrate. More flux. The other thing that happens is, the more this bait fluxes back here like this, the more this skirt wiggles. So if every time that blade is pulsing, that skirt is pulsing too, like this, which is creating so every time that blade moves, you're pulsing that skirt. All these things add up. So most of my baits, I run the wire a little longer. Another thing that the little bit of extra length on the wire does, if you're having trouble with a spinnerbait that's wanting to roll on you, like on a retrieve, the shorter this wire is, the more prone that bait's going to be to roll, because the blade overpowers the bait. If you'll make this arm a little longer, if you like burning a spinnerbait on the surface, make that arm long. Have somebody build you some with a long arm. You cannot reel it fast enough to make it roll over. It changes that complexity of the bait. It makes a really big difference. I throw a wake spinnerbait a lot, like the big giant Colorado blades. I have this arm, it's actually a little longer than this one. It's at that point, the bait will not roll. It'll just sit right up there on top, and you can just wake it right along. The arm is long. So remember that. Might give it a try. Hey, you may not like it. I know it works for me. I'm gonna show you another trick. If you're out on the water, and let's say you're throwing a standard willow leaf bait like this, and you're wanting to, let's say it's early spring, but you want to slow that bait down a little bit, or you want to create a little more slow vibration. And what this trick will do is, you take your standard willow leaf. See how it's got the cup on the inside right there? That's what makes this, the more cup that has, the more tighter that blade will spin. Take you some needle nose, get on the flat inside part right there, get right down on the end of the blade like that, and just smash that blade flat. See how I did that? Can you see that? Just smash it flat. Just the last 1/4 inch or so. What that will do to that willow leaf is, instead of it turning tight, it will now sway bigger. So you'll get a big, slow circle. So if you want to slow roll that bait, anything like that, and you're wanting just a nice slow thump or something like that, you can just flatten into that blade. That will completely change that blade and how it operates. It'll also help you if you're trying to keep that bait up high and reel it slow. That'll help with that on a willow leaf. Another thing you can do, it'll create a really totally different vibration on your bait. Let's say you're throwing a Colorado blade on your willow. Come in on the side, just hopefully you can see that. Get all my hands out of the way. So you got the bait, just come in on the side right here off the corner, just about like so, and just turn it out a little bit. So really all you're doing is just flattening that side off of there. Hope you can see that. But you can see that little crease I created in that blade right there. See it right there? You just flattened that corner out. So now, instead of this Colorado blade spinning really tight around this shaft, it now will swing real wide, and it'll give you like a kind of a type thing. And forgive me for the analogy there, just don't really know how to explain it. But it really helps the bait, and it changes the blade, and it just, you know, if you're following a lot of other guys throwing spinnerbait, little things make a difference. So bending those blades around, just, it never hurts to start tweaking. That's how I learned how to do that, just tweaking around on stuff. Another thing, sure enough, in this early spring is, you know, here I have a standard silicone skirt spinnerbait, and I mean, it wiggles a lot. It's all right. But here I have a round living, now look at that thing. Look at the action on that bait. It's unbelievable the difference that you get from living rubber. The other thing with this bait is it's real bulky. And this bait slows way down in the water. This skirt grabs a lot of water and it billows in the water. So when you slow it down, it'll flare out and slow down and flare out. If you're slow rolling in the early spring, nighttime, you cannot beat round living rubber. It's a little, you know, it's thick, but look at that. I mean, look at the difference. I mean, it's crazy. Living rubber. That's something a lot of pros don't want you to know right there. I can tell you right now. The other old skirt, and you've seen this kind of come back a little bit over the last few years, is the old standard. I still use these skirts a lot too. The old living rubber type skirts like this, they work excellent. I use them in some applications, but I kind of like the round rubber that I hand tie. It just has so much action. And one other thing, this is an old Jerry Ryan trick, and read this in Bassmaster years ago, and it makes a lot of difference. And I don't fish a really thick skirt on spinnerbait most of the time. If I want to bulk up, I'll add a trailer. But as you can tell, this bait, I like my skirt to be a little thin. The thinner the skirt, the better the blades work. I'll let the blades and the bait do the work, and I just have enough skirt. A lot of great guys that fish swim jigs all the time, they talk about not having too much skirt. And Jerry Ryan said the same thing on spinnerbait. He said, thin that skirt down, you'll catch a lot more bass on there. I like to thin it down, put me an old split tail trailer on there. It will help you catch some fish, and it just makes, the bait just feels better to me. So there's some things on spinnerbait. I love throwing one. I got more than I could ever imagine having in my life. It is a fish producer. I think it's a lost art throwing a spinnerbait like the old pros used to do. And surprising, you can catch a lot of bass still today on one. I hope y'all enjoyed that. I hope it helps you some, and we'll see you on the next one.